What happens when a broke single dad pretends to forget his wallet on a blind date with a millionaire CEO? The answer will shock you. And by the end of this story, you'll understand why sometimes the greatest love stories begin with the biggest lies. The rain hammered against the cracked windshield of Ethan Carter's ancient Ford pickup like bullets against armor, each drop a reminder of everything that was falling apart in his life. At 32, his hands were already scarred maps of 1,000 dock shifts, his back permanently bent from loading cargo containers that weighed more than hope itself. But none of that mattered now, as he sat in the parking lot of Mickey's Diner at 11:47 p.m., staring at his phone screen through bloodshot eyes. Your electricity will be disconnected in 72 hours unless payment is received immediately. The words blurred together as exhaustion pulled at his consciousness. 14 hours at the Seattle docks, loading ships bound for places he'd never see, and still not enough. Never enough. Daddy. The small voice cut through his despair like sunlight through storm clouds. In the rearview mirror, 4-year-old Lily sat strapped in her car seat, her wild blonde curls escaping from the ponytail he'd attempted that morning. Her pink dinosaur pajamas, the only clean clothes she had left, hung loose on her tiny frame. Yes, sweetheart. Are we going home soon? I'm really hungry. Ethan's chest tightened. The refrigerator at home contained exactly 1 apple, half a loaf of bread, and a container of milk that would expire tomorrow. His last $20 sat crumpled in his pocket. Money that should go toward groceries but would instead buy gas to get to work tomorrow. In a minute, baby. Daddy just needs to think. But thinking was a luxury he couldn't afford. In 3 days, they'd be sitting in darkness. In a week, maybe on the street. The landlord had already given him 2 extensions, and Mrs. Patterson from downstairs had started making pointed comments about certain tenants who couldn't keep up with their obligations. His phone buzzed. Marcus, his best friend since high school, and the only person who still believed Ethan deserved good things. Dude, you can't keep saying no. This woman is perfect for you. Successful, kind, loves kids. Just 1 dinner. What's the worst that could happen? Ethan nearly laughed at the absurdity. Marcus had been trying to set him up for months, convinced that love was the missing ingredient in Ethan's disaster of a life. As if romance could pay bills or put food on the table. As if any woman would look at a broken-down dock worker with a kid and see anything worth staying for. Sarah had made that clear enough 3 years ago. I didn't sign up for this, Ethan. I'm 26. I should be traveling, going out, living my life. Not playing stepmom to some kid who isn't even mine. The memory still cut deep, but not because he missed Sarah. Because she'd been right. What woman in her right mind would choose this life? Choose him. Another text from Marcus. Her name's Sophia. Meeting at Rosario's tomorrow at 7. She's already excited to meet you. Don't overthink this. Rosario's. Even the name sounded expensive. The kind of place where appetizers cost more than his entire grocery budget. Daddy, my tummy hurts. Lily's voice was smaller now, tinged with the kind of patience that no 4-year-old should have to possess. She never complained, never asked for toys or treats like other kids. She'd learned too young that wanting things only led to disappointment. Ethan twisted in his seat to face her, forcing a smile that felt like lifting weights. I know, Lily Pad. Tell you what, let's go inside and get you some chicken nuggets, okay? Her entire face lit up like Christmas morning. Really? With the smiley face ketchup. If they have it. As they walked through the diner's glass doors, Lily's small hand tucked safely in his, Ethan caught their reflection. A tired man in work boots and a faded flannel shirt, holding hands with a little girl whose pajamas had seen better days. They looked exactly like what they were, people hanging on by threads, trying to find comfort in a 24-hour diner at midnight. The waitress, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and sensible shoes, led them to a booth in the back. Lily immediately began arranging the sugar packets by color, a habit she'd developed during their frequent late-night diner visits, when the apartment felt too empty, too quiet, too much like the battleground it had become during those final months with Sarah. What can I get you folks? With chicken nuggets for her and... Ethan glanced at the prices, calculating quickly. Just coffee for me. You sure, honey? You look like you could use a good meal. The kindness in her voice almost undid him. Coffee's perfect. Thank you. As Lily chatted happily about her day at preschool, the finger painting the story about a brave princess, the new friend who shared her crackers, Ethan found himself thinking about Marcus's blind date setup. Sophia. What kind of name was that? Sophisticated, expensive, everything he wasn't. Tell me about the princess again, Lily. She was really brave, Daddy. She didn't need a prince to save her because she had her own sword and everything. And she had a daddy who loved her very, very much, even when things got scary. Something twisted in Ethan's chest. Even at 4, Lily was already learning to create stories where fathers didn't leave, where love didn't disappear when money got tight. His phone buzzed again. This time it was his sister Rebecca calling from Portland. Ethan. Thank God you picked up. I've been worried sick. Everything's fine, Becca. Don't lie to me. I can hear it in your voice. How bad is it? He glanced at Lily, who was now drawing flowers on her napkin with a broken crayon she'd found in her pocket. Can't really talk right now. The electric bill, among other things. Rebecca was quiet for a moment. As a nurse, she made decent money, but between her own family and student loans, there wasn't much left over. They'd had this conversation before. I wish I could help more, Ethan. You know, if I could. I know, we're managing. Have you thought about what I said about moving down here? There are good jobs in Portland, and Lily would love being near her cousins. The suggestion hung between them like a lifeline he couldn't quite reach. Portland meant starting over. It meant admitting defeat, leaving the only city Lily had ever known, abandoning the hope that somehow someday he could make this work. I can't just uproot her whole life. What life, Ethan? You're working yourself to death for. What, to barely keep the lights on? Lily needs stability. She needs family. Before he could respond, Lily looked up from her drawing. Daddy, who are you talking to? Aunt Becca. Can I say hi? Ethan handed her the phone, grateful for the interruption. As Lily chatted excitedly about her chicken nuggets and her drawing, he stared out the rain-streaked window at the empty parking lot. A few late-night stragglers moved between their cars and the diner, everyone seeking shelter from something. Whether loneliness, the weight of their own choices. When had his life become this? When had every day become a battle just to survive until the next one? He thought about his father, who died when Ethan was 25. Big Jim Carter had been a dock worker too, but he'd made it look easy. He'd come home every evening with stories and jokes, never letting on how much his body ached or how worried he was about bills. He'd made their small house feel like a castle, their modest dinners like feasts. Your old man's got magic hands, their neighbor used to say. Everything he touches turns to gold. But there'd been no magic in the end. Just a heart attack at 53, leaving behind a mountain of medical bills, and the crushing realization that all of Jim's optimism couldn't change the fact that dock work was a young man's game, and even young men got old. Daddy. Lily had finished her call and was looking at him with those enormous blue eyes. Sarah's eyes, though he tried not to think about that. Aunt Becca says we might move to Portland. Maybe, sweetheart. Would you like that? She considered this with the seriousness that small children brought to big questions. Would you be happy there? The question hit him like a physical blow. When was the last time anyone had asked if he was happy? When was the last time happiness had even been a consideration? I'd be happy anywhere you are, Lily Pad. She smiled, satisfied with this answer, and returned to her drawing, but the question lingered. Would he be happy in Portland? Could he be happy anywhere? Or had happiness become another luxury he couldn't afford? His phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. I told Sophia you're an amazing guy who's been through some tough times but has the biggest heart in Seattle. She can't wait to meet you. Tough times. As if his entire adult life could be summarized so simply. As if the sleepless nights, the constant worry, the way his chest tightened every time Lily asked for something he couldn't provide, as if all of that was just a rough patch he'd eventually overcome. But maybe Marcus was right about one thing. Maybe he was overthinking this. It was one dinner, one evening where he could pretend to be someone else, someone whose biggest worry wasn't whether the lights would stay on. And if this Sophia person was everything Marcus claimed, successful, kind understanding. Maybe she'd at least provide a few hours of adult conversation. Maybe she'd remind him what it felt like to talk about something other than bills and bedtimes and the crushing weight of single parenthood. "Daddy, look what I drew." Lily held up her napkin, now covered in crayon flowers and stick figures. In the center, a tall figure held hands with a smaller one under a yellow sun. "That's us," she announced proudly. "And look, I drew you smiling." In her drawing, his stick figure face bore a wide, happy curve. When was the last time he'd smiled like that? Really smiled. Not just the tired grimace he managed when Lily needed reassurance. "It's beautiful, baby. Can we put it on the refrigerator when we get home?" Home. Their cramped apartment with its leaky faucet and paper-thin walls where Mrs. Patterson's television could be heard until all hours and the neighbor's dog barked at shadows. But Lily called it home, and maybe that was enough. "Of course we can," the waitress returned with their check, $15 for nuggets, fries, and coffee. Ethan left a $5 tip knowing she probably needed it as much as he did, but unable to bear the thought of seeming cheap. In a world where everything felt like it was falling apart, small acts of generosity were sometimes the only things that made him feel human. As they drove home through the rain-soaked streets, Lily fell asleep in her car seat, her precious drawing clutched in her small fist. The radio played softly, an old song about second chances and new beginnings that made Ethan's throat tight with unnamed emotions. Maybe Portland wasn't such a bad idea. Maybe starting over somewhere else would give them both a chance at something better. But leaving meant giving up on the life he'd tried so hard to build, here admitting that all his struggles had been for nothing. His phone lit up with one final text from Marcus. "Trust me on this one, man. Something tells me tomorrow night is going to change everything." Change everything. As if one dinner could rewrite the story of his life, could somehow transform him from a struggling single father into someone worthy of love, worthy of a future that extended beyond just surviving until tomorrow. But as he carried a sleeping Lily up 2 flights of stairs to their apartment, as he tucked her into the bed they'd gotten from Goodwill and kissed her forehead in the darkness, Ethan found himself thinking about possibilities, about stick figure drawings where he was smiling, about women named Sophia who might see something in him worth staying for. Tomorrow was Saturday, his day off. The day he was supposed to meet a stranger at an expensive restaurant and pretend he was someone he wasn't. Maybe Marcus was right. Maybe it would change everything. Or maybe it would just be another reminder of everything he couldn't have, everything he wasn't good enough for. But for Lily's sake, for the little girl who drew him smiling and called their broken-down apartment home, maybe it was time to find out. The last thing he saw before sleep finally claimed him was Lily's drawing now taped to their refrigerator next to overdue bills and grocery lists. 2 stick figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun in a world where fathers smiled and children drew flowers and everything was exactly as it should be. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new worries, new reminders of everything that was wrong with his life. But tonight, for just a few hours, he could dream about the possibility that maybe, just maybe, there was still something right with it too. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of pale sunlight that seemed to apologize for existing. Ethan woke to the sound of Lily singing softly in her room, some half-remembered lullaby she'd learned at preschool mixed with words of her own invention. For a moment, lying there in the gray dawn light, he could almost forget about the electric bill, the empty refrigerator, the impossible dinner date that loomed ahead like a sentencing. "Daddy, I made my bed." Lily's voice rang out with the pride of a 4-year-old who'd managed to pull a comforter mostly straight. "That's my good girl," he called back, forcing enthusiasm into his voice. The apartment felt different in daylight. Smaller somehow, the worn patches on the carpet more obvious, the water stains on the ceiling more pronounced. Through the thin walls, he could hear Mrs. Patterson's morning routine, the shuffle of slippers, the grind of her ancient coffee maker. The volume of her television turned up just loud enough to remind everyone that these walls weren't meant to contain whole lives. Lily appeared in his doorway wearing mismatched socks and yesterday's shirt, her hair a wild halo of curls that defied gravity. She held her drawing from the night before, now slightly crumpled from sleep. "Can we have pancakes?" The request was so simple, so normal, that it nearly broke his heart. Pancakes required ingredients he didn't have, and even if he did, They couldn't afford the luxury of weekend breakfast traditions when every dollar counted. "How about we go to the grocery store first and then we'll see what we can make?" Her face lit up with the kind of joy that reminded him why he fought so hard to keep their small world intact. "Can I push the cart?" "If you promise not to crash into anything." As they prepared to leave, Ethan caught sight of himself in the bathroom mirror. The man staring back looked older than 32 lines etched deep around his eyes from too many sleepless nights and too much worry. His dark hair needed cutting, and his best shirt, the one he'd planned to wear tonight, bore a small stain near the collar that he'd somehow missed before. What was he thinking? Sophia Collins was probably expecting someone who looked like he had his life together, someone who could afford dinner at Rosario's without calculating the cost of each appetizer. Someone whose biggest concern wasn't whether his 4-year-old daughter would judge him for canceling at the last minute. The grocery store was an exercise in creative mathematics. $12.37 could buy bread, milk, eggs, and a small container of peanut butter if he chose the store brand and skipped the bananas Lily loved. She rode in the cart like a princess surveying her kingdom, pointing out colorful packages and asking thoughtful questions about why some people filled their carts, while others like them chose so carefully. "That lady has a lot of food," Lily observed, watching a woman unload what seemed like enough groceries to feed a small army. "She probably has a big family to feed. Bigger than us. Much bigger." Lily considered this. "I like our family size. It's perfect for hugs." Standing in the cereal aisle of a discount grocery store, Ethan felt his chest tighten with an emotion he couldn't name. Love, yes, but something more complicated. The fierce protectiveness that came with being someone's entire world, mixed with the crushing fear that he wasn't enough, would never be enough. At the checkout, the teenage cashier barely looked up as she scanned their meager purchases. $12.37. Exactly. Ethan had learned to calculate to the penny, a skill he'd never imagined needing when he was younger and believed the world held unlimited possibilities. "Daddy, can we make the pancakes now?" Back home, he performed the small miracle of turning their simple ingredients into something that resembled a proper breakfast. Lily stood on a chair beside him, cracking eggs with intense concentration and only minimal shell casualties. The kitchen filled with the warm smell of pancakes cooking, and for a few minutes their apartment felt like a home instead of a place where two people were simply trying to survive until tomorrow. "These are the best pancakes in the whole world," Lily announced, syrup coating her chin and pure happiness radiating from her small form. "Better than McDonald's." She gave this serious consideration. "Way better. Because you made them." The afternoon passed quietly. Lily played with her small collection of toys, while Ethan tried to focus on anything other than the approaching evening. He'd called Marcus twice, ready to cancel, but each time had hung up before the call connected. What would he say? That he couldn't afford to take a successful woman to dinner, that he was terrified she'd see through his pretense of being someone worth knowing. At 4 o'clock, Lily crawled into his lap while he sat on their second-hand couch, pressing her warm body against his chest in the way that always made the world feel more manageable. "Daddy, why do you look sad?" He kissed the top of her head, breathing in the sweet scent of her shampoo, the cheap kind that somehow smelled better than anything else in the world when it was in her hair. "I'm not sad, sweetheart, just thinking." About what? How could he explain that he was thinking about failure? About the way hope felt more dangerous than despair, because at least despair was honest. About how terrifying it was to want something. Someone, when wanting had always led to losing. About how lucky I am to have you. She tilted her head back to look at him with those serious blue eyes that saw too much. "Are you going somewhere tonight?" The question hit him like ice water. He'd been so focused on his own anxiety that he hadn't considered how this might affect her. Lily had separation anxiety that dated back to Sarah's departure, a 4-year-old's reasonable fear that people who said they loved you sometimes just stopped coming home. "Just for a little while. Remember how I told you about Uncle Marcus's friend? We're going to have dinner. Can I come?" The hope in her voice was devastating. She wanted to come because restaurants meant special occasions, treats, the kind of normal childhood experiences that other kids took for granted. She also wanted to come because leaving her alone with a babysitter, not that he could afford one, was unthinkable. "I don't think restaurants are really fun for kids, Lilypad." But even as he said it, an idea began forming in his mind. A terrible, wonderful, completely insane idea that would either destroy any chance he had with Sophia Collins, or something else entirely. What if he brought Lily? What if instead of pretending to be someone he wasn't, he showed up exactly as he was? A single father, whose daughter came first, always and forever. Any woman worth knowing would understand that. Any woman not worth knowing would reveal herself immediately. It was social suicide, of course. Who brought a 4-year-old on a blind date? But maybe that was exactly why it might work. Maybe honesty, even terrifying honesty, was better than the elaborate performance he'd been planning. Actually, he heard himself saying, maybe restaurants can be fun for the right kids. Would you like to come with Daddy tonight to meet Marcus's friend? Lily's entire face transformed with joy. Really? Can I wear my princess dress? The princess dress was a thrift store find from 6 months ago. Pale pink with a torn hem that he'd mended as best he could. She'd worn it to every birthday party invitation they'd received, every preschool celebration, every moment that required her very best. Of course you can wear your princess dress. By 6:30, they were both as ready as they'd ever be. Ethan wore his best jeans and the button-down shirt Rebecca had given him last Christmas, the stain, mostly hidden by strategic buttoning. Lily looked like a fairy tale in her pink dress, her wild curls tamed into something resembling a braid, her face glowing with the excitement of an adventure that didn't involve grocery stores or late-night diners. "Do I look beautiful, Daddy?" "You look like the most beautiful princess in the entire world." "Do you look handsome?" He caught their reflection in the hallway mirror, a nervous father and his radiant daughter dressed in their very best, and hoping it would be enough. "I look like the luckiest daddy in the world." The drive to Rosario's took them through parts of Seattle that Ethan rarely saw. Neighborhoods where the houses had front yards and attached garages where people lived lives that extended beyond mere survival. Lily pressed her face to the window, marveling at Christmas lights that were still up in January and asking questions about everything they passed. "Why are those houses so big?" "Some people need more space, I guess. For bigger families, maybe. I still like our apartment better. It's cozier." Rosario sat on a corner in Capitol Hill, like something from a different world entirely. Warm light spilled from large windows, and through them, Ethan could see couples leaning across small tables, wine glasses catching candlelight, the easy intimacy of people who belonged in places like this. He sat in his truck for a full minute, engine off, staring at the restaurant's elegant facade. This was insanity. He was about to walk into one of Seattle's nicest restaurants with a 4-year-old and pretend he deserved to be there. Pretend he could afford to be there. "Is this where we're meeting Uncle Marcus's friend?" "Yes, sweetheart. It looks fancy." "It is fancy." Lily smoothed down her princess dress with careful hands. "Good thing we dressed up." Her confidence was infectious. If a 4-year-old could walk into Rosario's like she owned the place, maybe he could too. Maybe the trick wasn't pretending to be someone else. Maybe it was remembering who he'd always been underneath the worry and exhaustion. The hostess looked surprised when they walked in. A tall man in work boots holding hands with a little girl in a thrift store dress, but her smile was genuine as she checked her reservation book. "You must be Ethan. Your party is already seated." Marcus had described Sophia as beautiful, successful, kind. He'd mentioned that she ran her own company, that she'd grown up with challenges of her own, that she had a laugh that could light up a room. What he hadn't mentioned was that she'd have the kind of presence that made everyone else fade into background noise. She sat at a corner table and Ethan saw her before she saw them. Dark hair pulled back in an elegant twist. A simple black dress that probably cost more than his monthly rent. But it was her posture that caught his attention, straight-backed and confident, but with a softness around the eyes that suggested vulnerability, carefully guarded. When she looked up and saw them approaching, her expression went through a series of changes too quick to catalog. Surprise, certainly. Confusion. And then, unexpectedly, delight. "You must be Ethan," she said, standing to greet them. Her voice carried the faintest hint of an accent he couldn't place. "And who is this beautiful princess?" Lily, who was usually shy with strangers, stepped forward with the poise of royalty. "I'm Lily. I'm 4 years old, and this is my very best princess dress. It's absolutely gorgeous. I don't think I've ever seen a more beautiful princess dress in my entire life." The compliment was delivered with such sincerity that Lily practically glowed. She looked up at Ethan with an expression that clearly said, "I like her already." "I hope you don't mind." Ethan began, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I know this isn't exactly what you were expecting, but my babysitter canceled last minute and I couldn't leave her alone, and I should have called to reschedule, but—" "Are you kidding?" Sophia's interruption was gentle but firm. "I love children. Please, both of you sit down." She gestured to the chair beside her, and without hesitation, Lily climbed up and settled in like she'd been dining at Rosario's her entire life. The hostess appeared with a booster seat and children's menu clearly accustomed to accommodating families, and suddenly, what had seemed like social suicide began to feel like the most natural thing in the world. "So, Lily," Sophia said, opening her own menu, but keeping her attention focused on the little girl. "What's your favorite food?" "Chicken nuggets. But Daddy makes really good pancakes too. We had them this morning with syrup and everything. Homemade pancakes are the very best kind. My dad used to make them for me and my brother every Sunday morning." Something in her tone suggested those Sunday mornings held precious memories, the kind that became more valuable with time. Ethan found himself studying her face, looking for clues to the story behind Marcus's description. Successful, yes. Everything about her spoke of achievement and confidence. But there were shadows too carefully concealed, but visible if you knew how to look for them. The waiter approached, probably wondering what kind of establishment they were running, when working-class men brought preschoolers to romantic dinner spots. But his professionalism never wavered as he took their drink orders. Wine for Sophia, coffee for Ethan, and chocolate milk for Lily, who announced her choice with the gravity of someone ordering champagne. "Marcus tells me you work at the docks," Sophia said once they were alone again. Here it was, the moment where he had to decide how much truth this evening could handle. He could minimize it, make it sound temporary or transitional. He could emphasize the honest work aspect, the steady paycheck, the benefits. Or he could tell her exactly what it meant to load cargo containers for 14 hours a day while your body slowly broke down and your dreams got smaller with each passing year. For about 8 years now, it's good work. Steady anyway. That's important. Stability. She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. "Marcus mentioned you're raising Lily on your own." Lily looked up from her coloring book, provided by the restaurant with the kind of thoughtfulness that suggested this place genuinely welcomed families, despite its upscale atmosphere. "Daddy takes really good care of me. We're a team." "The best kind of team," Sophia agreed, and something in her voice suggested she understood more about teams and taking care of people than she was letting on. As the evening progressed, Ethan found himself relaxing in ways he hadn't expected. Sophia didn't just tolerate Lily's presence, she embraced it, asking about preschool and favorite colors, and whether she liked to read stories. When Lily spilled chocolate milk on the white tablecloth, Sophia simply moved her water glass out of the way and helped clean up without missing a beat. "I used to spill things all the time when I was little," she confided to Lily. "My brother always said I had butterfingers." "Where is your brother now?" The question was innocent, the kind 4-year-olds asked without understanding that some questions carry weight. Sophia's pause was so brief that most people would have missed it entirely. "He lives far away now, but we still talk on the phone every week." Something in her tone suggested there was much more to that story. But before Ethan could wonder what their food arrived, he'd ordered the cheapest entree on the menu, a pasta dish that still cost more than he usually spent on groceries in 3 days. Sophia had chosen something elegant and expensive-looking, while Lily's chicken nuggets came arranged on a plate with artistic precision that made them look almost fancy. "These are the fanciest chicken nuggets I've ever seen," Lily announced, and Sophia laughed, a sound that was everything Marcus had promised and more. They're restaurant chicken nuggets. Very sophisticated. What does sophisticated mean? It means fancy and grown up, like your beautiful dress. Lily beamed with pride, and Ethan felt something shift in his chest. Watching Sophia interact with his daughter, really seeing her not just tolerating her presence, awakened something he'd thought was safely buried. Hope, maybe. Or the dangerous possibility that not every woman would see his circumstances as obstacles. "Can I ask you something?" Sophia said, turning her attention to Ethan while Lily focused on her sophisticated nuggets. "Sure." "What made you decide to bring Lily tonight? Most people would have rescheduled." The question was fair, and her tone held genuine curiosity rather than judgment. But how could he explain that he'd brought Lily because he was tired of pretending to be someone he wasn't, that he'd reached a point where authenticity felt more important than making a good impression? "Honestly, I almost canceled 3 times today. But then I realized that whoever I'm supposed to meet needs to know that Lily comes first. Always. If that's a problem, better to find out now." Sophia nodded slowly, as if his answer confirmed something she'd been wondering about. "I think that's the most honest thing anyone has ever said to me on a first date." "Is this officially a date?" The question slipped out before he could stop it, and immediately he wished he could take it back. But Sophia's smile was warm and real. "Well, it's dinner with interesting people and excellent company. What would you call it?" "The best evening I've had in a long time." And it was true. Sitting there in Rosario's watching Lily charm a successful businesswoman while candles flickered and conversation flowed easier than it had any right to, Ethan felt like himself in ways he'd almost forgotten were possible. Not the exhausted dock worker or the overwhelmed single parent, but the man he'd been before life got so complicated. The man who could hold interesting conversations and make people laugh and believe that he might be worth knowing. When dessert arrived, ice cream for Lily, something elaborate involving chocolate and raspberries for Sophia, coffee for Ethan, who couldn't justify the expensive dessert. The evening felt like it could stretch on indefinitely. But reality had a way of intruding on perfect moments, and Ethan's phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Patterson. "Sorry," he said, glancing at the message. "My neighbor. She likes to keep tabs on everyone's schedule." The text was brief but pointed. "Some of us have work in the morning. Try to keep it down when you get home." The reminder hit like cold water. Tomorrow was Sunday, which meant Monday was coming, which meant another week of 14-hour shifts and impossible choices, and the crushing weight of responsibilities he could barely manage. This dinner, this conversation, this glimpse of what his life might look like if circumstances were different. It was borrowed time and the loan was coming due. "Everything okay?" Sophia asked, her voice gentle with concern. "Fine. Just..." He gestured vaguely, not sure how to explain that his neighbor's passive-aggressive text was actually a reminder that he didn't belong in places like this with people like her. Lily, who had been listening to their conversation with the intense focus that 4-year-olds brought to adult interactions they didn't quite understand, suddenly spoke up. "Sophia, do you want to see my drawing?" She pulled out the napkin from the night before, now significantly more wrinkled but still recognizable as 2 stick figures under a bright sun. "That's me and Daddy," Lily explained. "He's smiling because we're happy." Sophia studied the drawing with the seriousness it deserved. "It's beautiful, Lily. You're a very talented artist. Daddy says we can put it on our refrigerator. That's exactly where beautiful art belongs." Something about the way she said it, not condescending or fake, but with genuine appreciation for a 4-year-old's vision of happiness, made Ethan's throat tight with emotion he couldn't name. When the check came, the moment he'd been dreading all evening finally arrived. $73 in change for 3 meals and drinks. More than his weekly grocery budget, more than he could afford, but somehow less than he'd feared. He reached for his wallet with hands that he hoped weren't shaking. "Let me get this," Sophia said, reaching for her purse. "No." The word came out sharper than he'd intended. "I asked you to dinner. I pay." She studied his face for a moment, and he was afraid she could see everything. The pride that was probably foolish, the desperation he was trying to hide, the mathematical calculations he was doing to figure out how to make this work without compromising next week's grocery money. "Okay," she said simply, and let him pay. Outside the restaurant, the January air was crisp and clean, carrying the promise of rain, but holding off for now. Lily skipped between them, her princess dress swirling around her legs, her energy inexhaustible despite the late hour. "Thank you for dinner," Sophia said as they reached Ethan's truck. "I had a wonderful time, even with the unexpected guest." Especially with the unexpected guest, she crouched down to Lily's level. "It was so nice to meet you, Princess Lily. Will I see you again?" The question hung in the air like something fragile and precious. Ethan held his breath, afraid to hope, afraid not to. "I hope so," Sophia said, and her voice carried a sincerity that made Ethan's chest tight with possibilities he didn't dare name. As they drove home through the quiet streets, Lily chattered about the evening. The fancy restaurant, the sophisticated chicken nuggets, the beautiful lady who liked her drawing. But Ethan found himself thinking about smaller moments, the way Sophia had listened to Lily, with genuine interest, how she'd cleaned up the spilled chocolate milk without fuss, the careful way she'd let him pay the check, despite obviously being able to afford it herself. "Daddy." "Yeah, sweetheart. I like Sophia. She's nice." "She is nice. Do you like her too?" The question was simple, the kind 4-year-olds asked without understanding the complexity of adult emotions. But as Ethan parked in front of their apartment building, as he looked up at the windows of their small home where tomorrow would bring the same worries and struggles that every day brought, he found himself thinking about possibilities. Maybe Marcus had been right. Maybe some people were worth the risk of hoping. "Yeah, Lilypad. I like her too." Sunday morning arrived with an unfamiliar lightness that seemed to fill every corner of their small apartment. For the first time in months, Ethan woke without the immediate crushing weight of worry settling on his chest. Instead, he found himself replaying moments from the night before. Sophia's genuine laughter when Lily had announced that sophisticated chicken nuggets were probably what princesses eat. The way her eyes had softened when she looked at his daughter's crayon, drawing the careful grace with which she'd navigated an evening that could have been awkward but had somehow felt perfectly right. Lily was already awake, sitting cross-legged on her bed with the princess dress carefully laid out beside her, like a treasured artifact. She was humming the same improvised lullaby from yesterday, but now it seemed to have acquired new verses about fancy restaurants and beautiful ladies who liked drawings. "Morning sunshine," Ethan said, leaning against her doorframe. "Daddy, do you think Sophia really liked my picture?" "I think she loved it." "Why?" Lily picked up a fresh piece of paper from her small art supplies box, crayons and coloring books that had been Christmas gifts from Rebecca Precious, because they were purely for joy, not necessity. "I want to make her a better one, with more colors." Something twisted in Ethan's chest as he watched his daughter carefully select her crayons, her small face serious with artistic intention. When was the last time Lily had been this excited about anything? When was the last time she'd had a reason to create something for someone new? Someone who might actually stay around long enough to appreciate it? The thought brought him back to earth with jarring suddenness. What was he doing? Building castles in the air based on one evening. No matter how perfect it had seemed, Sophia Collins was successful. Sophisticated, probably used to dating men who could afford to take her places like Rosario's without mentally calculating the cost of each appetizer. What could she possibly see in a dock worker with calloused hands and a 4-year-old daughter who came with every invitation? His phone buzzed from the kitchen counter where he'd left it charging. For a wild moment, his heart jumped with the possibility that it might be her, though he immediately chastised himself for the foolishness of that hope. She didn't even have his number, but it was Marcus, and his text message was practically vibrating with excitement. "Dude, call me now. Sophia just called and I am dying to hear how last night went." Ethan stared at the phone, his pulse quickening. Sophia had called Marcus. That could mean anything. That she'd enjoyed the evening, that she'd been horrified by his unconventional approach to dating, that she wanted to make sure Marcus never set her up with anyone like him again. The uncertainty was worse than knowing. "Lilypad, I need to make a quick phone call, okay?" Keep working on your picture." He stepped onto their small balcony, closing the sliding door behind him. The Seattle morning was crisp and clear, the kind of day that made even their rundown neighborhood look almost picturesque. In the distance, he could see the Space Needle piercing the skyline like a promise of bigger worlds, better possibilities. Marcus answered on the first ring. "Ethan Carter, you beautiful disaster. What the hell happened last night?" "Good morning to you too, Marcus." "Don't. Good morning me. Sophia called me an hour ago and I quote, 'Marcus, your friend Ethan is the most interesting man I've met in years.'" "Interesting Ethan. Do you know what that means in woman speak?" Ethan felt his chest tighten with something that might have been hope. "That I thoroughly confused her. That you impressed the hell out of her." She couldn't stop talking about Lily, about how natural and honest you were, about how refreshing it was to meet someone who wasn't trying to be anyone other than exactly who he is. The words hit Ethan like physical blows, each one carrying more weight than seemed possible. She really said that. She also said, and I'm paraphrasing here because I was too stunned to write it down word for word, that she hasn't felt that comfortable with anyone in longer than she cares to remember. "Dude, what did you do?" "Cast a spell." Ethan sank into one of the two plastic chairs that constituted their balcony furniture gifts from Rebecca that had seen better days, but still held the weight of a grown man contemplating the impossible. "I brought Lily." Silence stretched across the phone line for so long that Ethan wondered if the call had dropped. "You brought Lily to Rosario's on a first date." "My babysitter canceled," Ethan said, though even as the words left his mouth, he knew they weren't the whole truth. "And I figured if Sophia couldn't handle the fact that I have a daughter, better to know up front." "Ethan, you magnificent bastard. You're either the bravest man I know or the craziest. Maybe both. But it worked. She wants to see you again." The words hung in the air like something too precious to be real. She wanted to see him again. After last night, after knowing exactly who he was and what his life looked like, she still wanted more. Did she say when? She asked if you might be free for lunch today. Something casual, she said. Her treat. Today. As in a few hours. As in last night hadn't been a one-time glimpse into a world he couldn't afford to inhabit. It might actually be the beginning of something. "Marcus, I don't know what to say." "Say yes, you idiot. Say yes and then figure out how to not screw this up." After Marcus hung up, Ethan sat on the balcony for a long time watching the city wake up below him. Dog walkers emerged from apartment buildings, joggers pounded past on the sidewalks, the Sunday morning rhythm of a city that never quite stopped moving. Somewhere out there, Sophia Collins was thinking about him, about them, about the possibility of another meal, another conversation, another chance to see if the magic of last night could survive the harsh light of day. Back inside, Lily had progressed significantly on her new artwork. This one featured the same two stick figures, but now they were joined by a third. A figure with long dark hair and what appeared to be a dress. "That's Sophia," she announced without looking up from her careful coloring. "She's part of our picture now." "Lily, sweetheart, we only just met Sophia last night." "I know, but she likes us. I can tell." The confidence in her voice was both heartbreaking and inspiring. When had Lily developed such intuition about people? When had his 4-year-old daughter become so wise about matters of the heart? "How can you tell?" Lily finally looked up, her blue eyes serious with the weight of ancient wisdom contained in a very small package. "She looked at you the way you look at me, like you're the most important person in the whole world." The observation hit Ethan with the force of revelation. Had Sophia really looked at him that way? He'd been so focused on his own nervousness, his own inadequacies, that he might have missed the signs that she was feeling something too. His phone rang again, and this time the number was unfamiliar. His heart began to race before he even answered. "Hello?" "Ethan. This is Sophia. I hope I'm not calling too early." Her voice carried the same warmth he remembered from last night, but there was something else there too. A nervousness that suggested she might be feeling as uncertain about this as he was. "Not too early at all. We're just..." Well, Lily's making you another picture, actually. She's making me a picture. That's the sweetest thing I've ever heard. Is she there? Can I say hello? Ethan looked at Lily, who had abandoned all pretense of coloring and was staring at him with wide eyes full of hope. Lily, Sophia's on the phone. She'd like to say hi. Lily practically launched herself across the room to take the phone, and suddenly Ethan was listening to his daughter have an animated conversation with a woman he'd met exactly once, but who was already becoming important in ways that terrified and thrilled him. Hi, Sophia. I'm making you a picture with more colors this time. Yes, it has flowers and everything. My daddy's making pancakes, but they don't smell as good as yesterday because we're almost out of syrup. What, really, you want to have lunch with us? Ethan gently took the phone back, his heart pounding with the implications of that last exchange. Sorry about that. She gets excited. Don't apologize. She's wonderful. I was actually calling to see if you two might be interested in lunch today. I know it's short notice, but I thought we might try somewhere a little more kid-friendly. The suggestion was offered with such careful diplomacy that Ethan almost laughed. She was worried about suggesting a place that wouldn't be appropriate for Lily when last night she'd navigated Rosario's with his daughter like she'd been doing it for years. That sounds great. Where did you have in mind? There's a place called the Pancake Spot in Fremont. Best pancakes in Seattle, or so I'm told. They have a kids menu with crayons and everything. Pancakes. She'd heard Lily mention syrup and somehow intuited exactly what would make a 4-year-old happy. The thoughtfulness of it, the attention to details that most adults would have missed or dismissed, made Ethan's chest tight with gratitude and something deeper. Lily would love that. What time? Would noon work? I could pick you up, or we could meet there, whatever's easier. The offer to pick them up was clearly meant to be helpful, but Ethan found himself imagining Sophia pulling up to their apartment complex in whatever kind of car successful businesswomen drove, seeing the broken playground equipment and the graffiti that the landlord never quite got around to cleaning off. The image made him cringe. We'll meet you there. Noon sounds perfect. After they hung up, Lily performed a small victory dance around the living room, her princess dress from last night replaced by jeans and a sweater that had seen better days, but still carried the faint scent of the fabric softener he bought when he could afford the name brand. We're having pancakes with Sophia. This is the best Sunday ever. Her enthusiasm was infectious, but as the morning progressed, Ethan found himself battling waves of anxiety that had nothing to do with looking forward to seeing Sophia again. The Pancake Spot was casual, kid-friendly, exactly the kind of place where he could relax and be himself. So why did he feel like he was preparing for an exam he hadn't studied for? Maybe because last night had been contained, controlled. Dinner at Rosario's was a performance with clear parameters. Arrive, eat, pay, leave. But lunch at a casual restaurant felt more open-ended, more like real life. What if the magic of last night couldn't survive the bright fluorescent lighting of a family restaurant? What if Sophia realized that his blue-collar authenticity lost its charm when removed from candlelight and wine? By 11:30, they were ready to leave. Lily had insisted on bringing her new picture for Sophia, carefully folded and tucked into her small purse, a miniature handbag that Rebecca had given her for her birthday, complete with toy lipstick, and a tiny wallet that held pictures of her and Ethan. The drive to Fremont took them through neighborhoods that gradually improved as they moved away from their own. The houses grew larger, the yards more manicured, the cars newer and cleaner. Ethan found himself wondering which neighborhood Sophia lived in, what her home looked like, whether she'd ever driven through areas like his own, and wondered about the people who lived there. The Pancake Spot occupied a corner building that had clearly been renovated with families in mind. The windows were large and cheerful, and through them Ethan could see booths filled with parents and children, the comfortable chaos of weekend brunch. This was exactly the kind of place he would have chosen if he'd been brave enough to suggest a second meeting. Casual, affordable, welcoming to children. They arrived a few minutes early, and Ethan used the extra time to scan the parking lot for any sign of Sophia. When a sleek silver sedan pulled in and she emerged from the driver's seat, he felt his breath catch in his chest. She wore jeans and a soft blue sweater that made her eyes look even more striking than he'd remembered. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and without the elegant dress and restaurant lighting, she looked younger, more approachable, somehow more real. Sophia. Lily broke away from Ethan's hand and ran toward her with the fearless enthusiasm that only 4-year-olds possessed. Hey there, princess. Look at you. I love your sweater. That color is perfect on you. The compliment was genuine, delivered with the same sincerity she'd shown last night. Lily beamed and pulled the folded picture from her purse. I made you this. It's better than the other one because it has more colors, and I didn't mess up the flowers this time. Sophia accepted the artwork with the gravity it deserved, unfolding it carefully and studying it with real attention. The new drawing showed the same 3 figures from Lily's morning work, but now they were surrounded by an entire world. Trees and flowers, a yellow sun with rays extending in all directions, even what appeared to be a small house in the background. Lily, this is incredible. Look at all these details, and the colors are so beautiful. Is this a house? That's our house. Well, not our real house, but the house where we all live together and have pancakes every morning and nobody is ever sad. The innocent words hit Ethan like a physical blow. In her picture, Lily had created the family she wanted, the world, where her father never worried about money and new people didn't leave, and every morning brought the luxury of pancakes and happiness. It was 4-year-old wishful thinking, but it was also a window into dreams he hadn't known she carried. It's the most beautiful house I've ever seen, Sophia said, and her voice carried a thickness that suggested the picture had affected her too. Would it be okay if I kept this? I'd like to put it somewhere special. Really? You want to keep it? I would be honored to keep it. Inside the restaurant, they were seated at a booth near the window where the Sunday afternoon light streamed in warm and golden. The pancake spot lived up to its name. The menu featured dozens of pancake varieties from traditional buttermilk to elaborate creations topped with fruit and whipped cream and enough sugar to power a small city. Lily studied the children's menu with the intensity of a scholar, occasionally asking Ethan to read descriptions of items that caught her eye. Sophia watched this process with obvious delight, occasionally offering opinions when consulted about the relative merits of chocolate chip versus blueberry pancakes. I think, Lily announced finally, I want the Mickey Mouse pancakes, but only if they come with extra syrup. Extra syrup for Mickey Mouse pancakes coming right up, their waitress said with a smile. She was probably in her 50s with the kind of efficient friendliness that suggested she'd been serving families for years and genuinely enjoyed it. And for you folks, Ethan ordered coffee and a basic breakfast, still mentally calculating costs, even though Sophia had said this was her treat. The habit of financial caution was too ingrained to abandon easily, even in the face of generosity. Sophia chose something elaborate involving strawberries and cream, but her attention remained focused on Lily, who was now explaining the complex rules of a game she'd apparently invented, involving sugar packets and napkins. So if the pink packet lands on the napkin with the flower, that means it's going to be a sunny day. But if it lands on the one with the teddy bear, we might get snow, Lily explained, with the seriousness of someone outlining crucial meteorological principles. That's very scientific, Sophia said with equal gravity. How accurate is your forecasting usually? I predicted yesterday would be special, and it was. We went to the fancy restaurant and met you. You did predict that. That's amazing forecasting. I'm pretty good at knowing when good things are going to happen. Sophia glanced at Ethan over Lily's head, and something passed between them. An acknowledgement of the child's innocence, perhaps, or recognition of the hope that 4-year-olds carried so effortlessly. When their food arrived, the Mickey Mouse pancakes were exactly as advertised. 3 perfect circles arranged to form the famous mouse ears, complete with chocolate chip eyes and a whipped cream smile. Lily's reaction was pure joy, the kind of uninhibited delight that made every adult in the vicinity smile. Daddy, look, Mickey is smiling at me. He's very happy to meet you, I think. As they ate, conversation flowed as easily as it had the night before. Sophia asked Lily about preschool, her friends, her favorite stories. She listened to the answers with genuine interest, asking follow-up questions that showed she was really paying attention, not just making conversation. Do you have a favorite princess? Sophia asked as Lily worked her way through Mickey's left ear. Belle, because she likes books, and she's nice to the beast even when everyone else is scared of him. That's a good choice. Belle is very kind and brave. My daddy is kind and brave too. He's not scary like the Beast, but he works really hard and he always makes sure I'm safe and he reads me stories even when he's super tired. Ethan felt heat rise in his cheeks at his daughter's matter-of-fact assessment of his character. Through her eyes, he was a hero instead of a man barely keeping his head above water. Through her eyes, their small apartment was a castle and their simple meals were feasts, and his love was enough to make up for everything they didn't have. "Your daddy sounds pretty wonderful," Sophia said, and when she looked at Ethan, her expression held something warm and appreciative that made his heart skip beats. "He is wonderful." "Are you wonderful too?" The question was so direct, so innocent that Sophia laughed, that same laugh that had captivated him the night before. "I try to be. Some days I'm better at it than others." "What do you do when you're not being wonderful?" "Lily." Ethan began, ready to redirect his daughter's interrogation, but Sophia held up a gentle hand. "It's okay. That's a fair question." She considered for a moment as if deciding how much honesty a 4-year-old could handle. "Sometimes I work too much and forget to call my friends. Sometimes I get so busy that I forget to do fun things like go to parks, or make pancakes, or draw pictures. What about you? What do you do when you're not being wonderful?" "Sometimes I get cranky when I'm tired and sometimes I don't want to clean up my toys. But Daddy says that's normal, and he loves me anyway." "That sounds very normal to me. And it sounds like your daddy is very wise." After lunch, they found themselves walking slowly through Fremont's quirky downtown area, where sculpture and murals turned everyday streets into something approaching art galleries. Lily ran ahead, chasing pigeons and pointing out interesting storefronts, while Ethan and Sophia followed at a more leisurely pace. "Thank you for this," Ethan said as they paused in front of a vintage bookstore with windows full of children's books. "Lunch, I mean. And for being so patient with Lily. Not everyone would be so what? Understanding about the fact that she comes with me. Everywhere, always." Sophia stopped walking and turned to face him fully. Her expression was serious, thoughtful, as if she was choosing her words carefully. "Can I tell you something, Ethan? Last night, watching you with Lily, seeing how much she adores you and how carefully you take care of her, that wasn't something I had to be patient with. That was something beautiful to witness." Her words hit him with unexpected force. Beautiful. She thought his relationship with his daughter was beautiful, not burdensome or complicated or any of the other words people had used to describe single fatherhood. "I haven't always felt like I was doing a good job," he admitted. "Some days I feel like I'm failing her in 100 different ways." "What does she think?" "She thinks I'm Superman, which is terrifying because I know how far I am from that. Maybe the fact that you know you're not Superman is exactly what makes you a good father. Maybe trying so hard to be enough for her is what makes you more than enough." They had stopped walking entirely, now standing in front of a mural that depicted a family of whales swimming through an urban landscape that somehow made perfect sense in Fremont's context. Lily had discovered a small playground across the street and was eyeing it with obvious longing. "Can I play on the swings?" she called back to them. "For a few minutes," Ethan replied, and she took off running with the energy that seemed to power her small body indefinitely. "She's remarkable," Sophia said, watching Lily scramble onto a swing and begin pumping her legs with determination. "So confident, so joyful. You've done something incredible with her." "I've just loved her. That's all I know how to do." "That's everything, Ethan. Love like that, consistent and unconditional. That's the foundation everything else is built on." Something in her voice suggested she spoke from experience, from knowledge, gained through situations that had taught her the value of that kind of love. Ethan found himself wondering about her childhood, her family, the brothers she'd mentioned who lived far away. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "Last night you mentioned raising your brother after your parents died. How old were you?" Sophia was quiet for a moment, watching Lily swing higher and higher with the fearless abandon of childhood. 16. David was 8. Our parents were killed in a car accident, and I was legally old enough to be his guardian, instead of letting him go into foster care. The simple words carried enormous weight. 16 years old, taking responsibility for an 8-year-old brother, giving up her own adolescence to make sure he had stability and love and a chance at a normal childhood. That must have been terrifying. Overwhelming. The best decision I ever made. She turned to look at him, and her eyes held depths of experience that explained the maturity he'd sensed in her, the careful way she approached relationships. I know what it's like to have someone depend on you completely. To know that every choice you make affects not just you, but someone you love more than your own life. Understanding passed between them like a shared language. She knew about sleepless nights spent worrying about money, about putting someone else's needs before your own, without question about the fierce protectiveness that came with being responsible for another person's happiness and safety. How is David now? He's a doctor in San Francisco. Pediatric surgery. He saves children's lives for a living, which I like to think is partly because someone took care of him when he needed it most. You must be proud. I'm proud, and I'm grateful that he grew up to be such a good man despite having me stumbling through trying to raise him. I doubt you were stumbling. I bet you were exactly what he needed. Some days I felt like I was drowning, like I had no idea what I was doing and I was going to mess him up permanently. And now I realize that loving someone enough to keep trying, even when you're scared you're failing, is probably the most important thing you can do. Lily's laughter carried across the playground as she jumped off the swing at the peak of its arc landing with the graceless confidence of childhood. She ran back to them with grass stains on her knees and joy radiating from every inch of her small frame. Did you see how high I went? I almost touched the sky. You were practically flying, Sophia agreed. I think you might be part bird. Can we come back here sometime? This is a really good playground. The question hung in the air with all its innocent implications. Sometime meant future visits meant Sophia being part of more afternoons like this one. Lily's assumption that there would be more times together was both heartwarming and terrifying in its certainty. I'd like that, Sophia said, looking at Ethan as much as at Lily. I'd like that very much. As they walked back toward the restaurant where they'd left their cars, Ethan found himself thinking about the difference between last night and today. Last night had been magical, but it had also been contained within the formal structure of dinner and candlelight and best behavior. Today felt more real, more sustainable. Today felt like the beginning of something that could actually exist in the world where he lived. Ethan, Sophia said as they reached her car, would you be interested in getting together again this week? Maybe something during the day when Lily's at preschool, just the two of us. The suggestion sent his pulse racing. Just the two of them. A chance to have adult conversation without worrying about chicken nugget spills or playground safety. A chance to really get to know each other without the beautiful distraction of his daughter's presence. But even as excitement coursed through him, practical concerns crowded in. When could he possibly take time off during the day? His shift started at 6 a.m. and usually ran until at least 6 p.m. He had exactly 0 personal days saved up, and missing work meant missing pay he couldn't afford to lose. I'd love to, he said carefully, but my schedule is pretty inflexible. The docs don't really do lunch breaks or personal time. What about after work? We could meet for coffee or dinner or just walk around somewhere. After work. When he was exhausted and probably covered in the kind of industrial grime that no amount of hand washing could completely eliminate. When his back ached and his hands were stiff and he looked like exactly what he was, a manual laborer at the end of a long shift. But the hope in her voice, the genuine desire to spend time with him, overrode his insecurities. That could work. What did you have in mind? There's a little coffee shop near Pike Place Market that stays open late. Quiet, good coffee, comfortable chairs. Would Thursday work around 7? Thursday, 3 days away. Enough time to work himself into a complete panic about what to wear, what to say, how to be interesting enough to hold the attention of a woman who could have anyone she wanted. Thursday sounds perfect. Daddy, are you going on another date? Lily asked with the directness that made conversations with 4-year-olds both delightful and dangerous. Maybe, sweetheart. Would that be okay with you? Lily considered this with her usual seriousness. Will you tell Sophia about the pictures I drew for her? I'll tell her all about your pictures. And will you tell her that she can come have pancakes with us anytime she wants? I think that's a very nice invitation to extend. Good. I like her. She makes you smile different. Different how? Like you're happy inside, not just pretending to be happy for me." The observation was so astute, so painfully accurate, that Ethan felt his chest tighten with emotion. Had his 4-year-old daughter really been aware all this time that his smiles were often performances carefully constructed to shield her from his worries and fears? "Lily's very perceptive," Sophia said gently. "I think she might be right about the smiling thing." As they said goodbye, Lily hugged Sophia with the enthusiasm she usually reserved for favorite relatives or particularly good bedtime stories. Sophia hugged her back just as tightly, and when she straightened up, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Thank you for lunch," Ethan said. "For everything, really. Thank you for letting me be part of your Sunday. Both of you." Driving home with Lily chattering about the playground and the Mickey Mouse pancakes, and how Sophia had promised to keep her picture somewhere special, Ethan found himself thinking about possibilities that had seemed impossible just 2 days ago. A woman who saw beauty in his relationship with his daughter instead of complications. Someone who understood what it meant to sacrifice for family, who didn't judge him for his circumstances, but seemed to admire the way he handled them. Maybe Marcus had been right. Maybe some risks were worth taking, even when you had everything to lose. Thursday couldn't come soon enough. Thursday arrived with the kind of anticipation that made every minute stretch like hours. Ethan found himself checking his phone constantly throughout his shift, not for messages. He had none, but to track the crawling progress of time towards 7 o'clock. The coffee shop near Pike Place Market. A chance to sit across from Sophia without the delightful chaos of a 4-year-old mediating their conversation, without the safety net of parental duties to fall back on when words became difficult. By 5:30, he was showered and standing in front of his small closet, staring at the limited options that constituted his non-work wardrobe. The blue button-down from Sunday lunch was dirty. The sweater Rebecca had given him last Christmas made him look like he was trying too hard. In the end, he settled on dark jeans and a plain gray t-shirt that was clean and fit him well. Simple, honest, the clothing equivalent of the man he was trying to be. Lily sat on his bed offering commentary on his appearance with the brutal honesty that only 4-year-olds could deliver without malice. "Your hair looks funny when you try to make it flat, Daddy. It's better messy." "You think so?" "Uh-huh. And you smell like the soap that makes bubbles." "Is that good or bad?" She considered this with the gravity she brought to all important questions. "Good. Sophia will like it. She likes when things smell nice." "How do you know what Sophia likes?" "Because she told me my dress smelled like flowers at the fancy restaurant, and she smiled when she said it." Ladies notice smells. Sometimes Ethan wondered if his daughter had been born with intuitive wisdom about human nature that had somehow skipped him entirely. She navigated social situations with an ease that left him amazed and slightly envious. Mrs. Patterson had agreed to watch Lily for the evening, an arrangement that involved $20 Ethan couldn't really afford, and a stern lecture about responsible parenting from a woman whose own children visited exactly twice a year. But it was worth it for the peace of mind that came with knowing Lily was safe and familiar hands, even if those hands came attached to unsolicited opinions about his life choices. The drive into downtown Seattle felt different at this hour. The commuter traffic had thinned, replaced by the evening crowd heading to restaurants and theaters, and the kind of nightlife that Ethan had almost forgotten existed. Young couples walked hand in hand along the sidewalks, their faces bright with possibility, and the assumption that good things were always waiting around the next corner. He found parking 2 blocks from the coffee shop, a minor miracle in downtown Seattle, and walked the remaining distance through streets that seemed to pulse with urban energy. The coffee shop occupied a corner spot with large windows that spilled warm light onto the sidewalk. Through the glass, he could see a handful of customers scattered among mismatched chairs and small tables, the kind of deliberately eclectic atmosphere that suggested the owners valued comfort over conformity. Sophia was already there, seated at a table by the window with 2 cups in front of her. She wore a simple white blouse and dark pants, her hair loose around her shoulders in soft waves that caught the light. When she saw him approaching through the window, her face lit up with a smile that made his chest tight with gratitude and disbelief that this was his life, that she was waiting for him. "I hope you don't mind," she said as he settled into the chair across from her. I ordered for both of us. Coffee for you, and I guessed it cream and sugar. Black coffee is perfect, thank you. The coffee was good, the kind of rich, complex blend that spoke of careful sourcing and genuine care in preparation. But more than that, it was warm between his hands and gave him something to focus on while his nerves settled into something resembling calm. "How was your day?" she asked, and the simple question carried genuine interest that still surprised him. "Long, busy. We had 3 container ships come in, which means everybody's running around trying to get cargo moved before the next tide." He paused, wondering if the details of dock work would bore her if she was just being polite. "What about you? What does your day look like when you're not having lunch with 4-year-olds and their nervous fathers?" "Meetings mostly. Phone calls with clients, reviewing contracts, the glamorous world of business consulting." She took a sip of her coffee, considering. "Actually, lunch on Sunday was the best part of my week. Lily has this way of making everything seem more interesting, doesn't she?" "She does. Sometimes I think she sees the world the way it's supposed to be instead of the way it is. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. Maybe adults could learn something from that perspective." There was something wistful in her voice, a suggestion of someone who had learned to see the world's sharp edges too young and sometimes missed the gentler view that children brought to everything. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan said, setting down his coffee cup and meeting her eyes directly. "Why are you here? I mean, really. You could be having coffee with anyone. You could be dating lawyers or doctors or other successful business owners. Why the dock worker with the 4-year-old daughter?" The question had been building inside him since Sunday, growing stronger with each hour that passed. Not self-pity, exactly, but genuine confusion about what she might see in him that he couldn't see in himself. Sophia was quiet for a moment, her fingers wrapped around her coffee cup as she seemed to choose her words carefully. "Do you want the polite answer or the honest one?" "Always honest. Because when I watch you with Lily, I see something I've been looking for my entire adult life. I see a man who knows what really matters and isn't afraid to make it his priority. I see someone who loves without conditions, who shows up every day and does the work of being a good father, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." She paused, looking out the window at the evening crowd moving past on the sidewalk before continuing. "I've dated successful men, Ethan. Men with impressive titles and expensive cars and all the external markers that are supposed to matter. But I've never met anyone who made me feel like I was witnessing something genuinely heroic just by watching them live their daily life." Heroic. The word came out rougher than he intended. There's nothing heroic about barely keeping your head above water. Isn't there? You work 14-hour days at a physically demanding job to provide for your daughter. You come home exhausted and still have energy to read her stories and help with her artwork and make her feel like the most important person in the world. You brought her to dinner at Rosario's because you refused to pretend she wasn't the center of your universe. How is that not heroic? Her words hit him like physical blows, each one carrying more weight than seemed possible. He'd spent so many years focused on his failures, his limitations, the ways he fell short of the father he wanted to be, that hearing someone describe his life as heroic felt almost surreal. Most days I feel like I'm failing her. Based on what evidence she's confident, joyful, secure in your love, creative, kind to strangers. What part of that suggests failure? The part where I can't afford to buy her new clothes or take her to movies or give her a bedroom that isn't smaller than most people's closets. Sophia leaned forward, her expression intense with something that might have been urgency. "Ethan, can I tell you what I remember most about my childhood? Not the house we lived in or the toys I had or the places my parents took me. I remember Sunday mornings when my father would make pancakes and let David and me help, even though we made huge messes. I remember my mother reading to us before bed, doing different voices for all the characters. I remember feeling completely safe and completely loved." She reached across the table and covered his hand with hers, her touch warm and sure. "That's what you're giving Lily. That's what matters. Everything else is just details." The contact sent electricity through his entire system, but more than that, it was an anchor that kept him steady in the face of kindness he wasn't sure he deserved. "You make it sound so simple." "It is simple. It's just not easy." There's a difference." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, her hand still covering his, the coffee shop buzzing with quiet conversation around them. Through the window, Seattle's evening energy continued its eternal dance of people going places, seeking connection, building the small moments that accumulate into lives. "Can I ask you something now?" Sophia said finally. "Anything. What happened with Lily's mother?" The question he'd been dreading since the moment they met. Not because the answer was complicated, but because it revealed something about him that he wasn't proud of. His ability to choose people who couldn't or wouldn't stay his talent for loving women who saw his daughter as an obstacle rather than a gift. Her name was Sarah. We dated for about a year before Lily was born. When she got pregnant, we thought we wanted the same things: family commitment, building something together. But after Lily arrived, he paused, trying to find words that were honest without being bitter. Sarah realized that being a mother wasn't what she'd imagined. The sleepless nights, the way your entire life has to revolve around this tiny person who needs you completely. She tried for about a year and then she left. That must have been devastating. For me, yes. For Lily, it was probably a blessing. She was too young to really understand what was happening, and Sarah was already pretty checked out by the time she actually left. At least now Lily doesn't have to wonder why her mother seems to resent her presence. "Do you hear from Sarah at all?" "Christmas cards. Birthday cards for Lily, though she usually sends them a week late. She lives in California now, I think. Has a new life that doesn't include room for the complications of motherhood." Sophia was quiet, processing this information with the careful attention she seemed to bring to everything. "Her loss," she said finally. "You think so? I know so. Lily is extraordinary, Ethan. Any mother who would walk away from that child is missing out on the most important relationship she'll ever have the chance to build." The fierce certainty in her voice surprised him. Sophia had known Lily for exactly 4 days, had spent maybe 6 hours total in her presence, but she spoke about his daughter with the protective love usually reserved for family. "She seems to have found a pretty good substitute," he said, thinking of the way Lily's face lit up whenever Sophia's name was mentioned. "I'm not trying to replace anyone, but if Lily wants someone in her life who thinks she's amazing and wants to hear about her drawings and her playground adventures and her theories about sophisticated chicken nuggets, I'm happy to be that person." "And what about her father? What if he comes as part of the package?" The question slipped out before he could stop it, loaded with vulnerability he hadn't meant to reveal. But Sophia's smile was warm and real as she squeezed his hand. Especially her father. The coffee shop was beginning to empty as the evening grew later, but neither of them seemed eager to end the conversation. They talked about books they'd loved as children, places they'd dreamed of traveling, the small moments that had shaped who they'd become. Sophia told him about building her consulting business from nothing, about the terror and exhilaration of being responsible for her own success. Ethan found himself sharing stories about his father, about the lessons learned through calloused hands and quiet determination. "He sounds like a good man," Sophia said, when he finished describing Jim Carter's approach to fatherhood. "He was. I just hope I'm half the father to Lily that he was to me. From what I've seen, you're doing him proud." As they finally prepared to leave, Ethan felt the familiar anxiety that came with endings. Would she want to see him again? Had he been interesting enough, engaging enough, worth the time she'd invested in getting to know him? The questions crowded in his mind, like unwelcome guests, undermining the confidence her presence had given him. "Ethan," she said, as they stood outside the coffee shop, the Seattle evening cool around them. "Would you be interested in doing something this weekend? Maybe something we could all do together?" Relief flooded through him so completely that he almost laughed. She wanted to see him again. She wanted to include Lily, wanted to be part of their small world instead of asking him to step away from it. "What did you have in mind?" "There's a children's museum in Georgetown that I've always wanted to visit but never had a reason to. Interactive exhibits, hands-on learning, the kind of place where Lily could touch everything and ask a million questions." "She would love that. Are you sure you want to spend your Saturday surrounded by 4-year-olds and science experiments?" "I can't think of anything I'd rather do." The drive home took him through familiar neighborhoods that somehow looked different now, touched by the possibility that his life might be expanding, in directions he'd never imagined. Mrs. Patterson met him at her door with Lily already in pajamas and a detailed report of their evening activities. "She's a good child," the older woman said with the grudging approval she reserved for rare occasions. "Well-mannered, polite, but she talked about this Sophia person the entire time. Sophia this, Sophia that. You'd better be careful, young man. Children get attached quickly." "I know, Mrs. Patterson. Thank you for watching her. She's asleep on my couch. Didn't want to go to bed until you got home. Insisted she had to tell you about the picture she drew for Sophia's refrigerator." Lily was indeed asleep, curled up on Mrs. Patterson's ancient sofa, with a new drawing clutched in her small fist. Even in sleep, she looked pleased with herself, as if her dreams were full of art projects and museum adventures and the expanding universe of people who cared about her. Carrying her up to their apartment, Ethan felt the weight of responsibility that had become so familiar over the past 3 years. But tonight it felt different. Not lighter exactly, but shared somehow. As if the burden he'd carried alone might actually have room for another pair of hands, another heart willing to help bear the load. Lily stirred as he tucked her into bed, her eyes opening just enough to focus on his face in the dim light from the hallway. "Did you have fun with Sophia, Daddy?" "I did, sweetheart. She asked if we'd like to go to a museum with her this weekend. Would you like that? A real museum with dinosaurs. I think it's more about science and learning, but maybe some dinosaurs too." Lily smiled sleepily, satisfied with this answer. "I knew she would want to do more fun things with us. I could tell when I met her." "How could you tell?" "Because she looked at us like we were the best thing that happened to her all day. Like Grandma Rebecca looks at us when we visit." The comparison to Rebecca, who loved them unconditionally and thought Lily hung the moon, was high praise indeed. As Lily drifted back to sleep, Ethan found himself thinking about the evening, about Sophia's hand covering his, about the way she'd described his daily life as heroic. Maybe his daughter was right. Maybe some people really did look at their small family and see something worth celebrating instead of something to be pitied or fixed. Maybe love didn't always have to be complicated by conditions and expectations and the fear that it wouldn't be enough. Saturday couldn't come soon enough, and for the first time in years, Ethan fell asleep, not worrying about tomorrow, but looking forward to it. The Children's Museum turned out to be exactly what Lily had hoped for, and more. 3 floors of interactive exhibits designed to make learning feel like the world's best playground. She approached each display with the methodical enthusiasm of a scientist testing every button, trying every activity, asking questions that ranged from perfectly reasonable to wonderfully absurd. "Why do bubbles pop when you touch them, but not when they touch each other?" she asked Sophia as they stood in front of a bubble-making station that had captured her complete attention. "That's a great question. What do you think?" "I think maybe bubbles have feelings and they don't like fingers, but they like other bubbles." "That could be it. Or maybe it has something to do with the soap and water and how they stick together." "Can we test both theories?" Watching Sophia patiently explore every hypothesis Lily proposed, Ethan felt something settle into place in his chest that had been restless for years. This was what family looked like when it worked. Adults taking children's questions seriously, learning becoming an adventure instead of a chore, love expressed through attention and time, and the willingness to see the world through younger eyes. In the physics section, Lily discovered a pendulum display that let her swing different weights and observe how they moved. She spent 20 minutes conducting what she called very important experiments, while Sophia recorded the results in a small notebook with the seriousness of a research assistant. "The heavy ball swings slower but longer," Lily announced after careful observation. "The light ball swings faster but stops sooner. This is very scientific information." "Very scientific," Sophia agreed. "Should we write that down in our research notes?" "Yes, and we should test it again to make sure." "Good thinking. Real scientists always test their theories multiple times." Ethan found himself hanging back, slightly content to watch the 2 most important people in his world discover they had their own unique chemistry. Sophia didn't interact with Lily the way most adults did. She didn't talk down to her or dismiss her ideas or try to rush her through activities. Instead, she met his daughter exactly where she was treating her observations and questions with the respect usually reserved for peers. When they broke for lunch in the museum cafe, Lily had accumulated a small collection of stickers, a temporary tattoo of the solar system, and enough new information to fuel weeks of bedtime questions about how the world worked. "This is the best museum day ever," she announced, carefully arranging her French fries in order of size. "Sophia, do you know about volcanoes?" "A little bit." "Do you? I know they have hot lava that comes from inside the Earth, and I know they can make new islands. But I don't know why the Earth has hot lava inside it in the first place." "That's another great question. What do you think? Maybe the Earth ate something spicy a long time ago, and it's still trying to cool down." Sophia's laugh was delighted and genuine. "That might be the best volcano theory I've ever heard. We should definitely investigate that further." After lunch, they tackled the art section where Lily created a masterpiece involving finger paints, glitter, and enough enthusiasm to coat everything within a 3-foot radius. Sophia gamely participated, ending up with paint on her sleeves and sparkles in her hair, looking more relaxed and joyful than Ethan had yet seen her. "Are you sure you don't mind getting messy?" he asked as they waited for Lily's artwork to dry. "Are you kidding? This is the most fun I've had in months. When's the last time you let yourself get completely covered in finger paint for a good cause?" "I honestly can't remember." "That's a shame. Everyone should get messy for art at least once a month. It's good for the soul." As the afternoon wound down and they prepared to leave, Lily carefully gathered her art supplies and scientific discoveries, chattering about everything they'd learned and experienced. In the museum gift shop, Sophia quietly purchased a small book about volcanoes and bubbles, presenting it to Lily for further research. "This is perfect for my very important scientific studies," Lily said, clutching the book like treasure. "Thank you, Sophia. You're the best museum partner ever." "Thank you for being such an excellent scientist today. I learned so much." Walking to their cars as the Seattle afternoon sunshine slanted through the trees, Ethan felt the kind of contentment that came from perfect days. The rare combination of simple pleasures, good company, and the sense that everything was exactly as it should be. "Same time next week?" Sophia asked as they reached her car. "You want to do this again?" "Every week, if you'll let me. Lily and I have very important ongoing research to conduct." That evening, as he helped Lily organize her museum treasures and listen to her detailed recap of every exhibit they'd visited, Ethan found himself thinking about the future in ways he'd avoided for years. What if this was real? What if Sophia genuinely wanted to be part of their lives, not just for a few weeks or months, but for the long term? What if he was actually worthy of the kind of love that stayed, that grew stronger with time, instead of fading when faced with the reality of daily life? The questions were terrifying and wonderful in equal measure, full of possibilities he'd stopped allowing himself to imagine. But as Lily fell asleep with her volcano book and her scientific notebook as he sat in their small living room surrounded by the evidence of a perfect day, Ethan allowed himself to hope that maybe, just maybe, their small family was about to get a little bigger. And for the first time in 3 years, that didn't scare him. It felt like coming home. 2 weeks later, Ethan found himself staring at his phone with the kind of dread usually reserved for overdue bills or medical emergencies. The text message was simple, direct, and completely devastating. "We need to talk. Can you meet me at the coffee shop tonight? There's something I need to tell you." His hands shook as he read the words again, searching for hidden meaning, for some interpretation that didn't end with Sophia walking out of their lives as quickly as she'd entered them. This was how it always happened. The slow build of hope, the careful construction of dreams, and then the inevitable moment when reality reasserted itself and reminded him that men like him didn't get fairy tale endings. The past 2 weeks had been the happiest of his adult life. Museum visits had become a Saturday tradition, with Lily accumulating enough scientific knowledge to qualify for kindergarten honors and enough art supplies to open her own studio. Sophia had integrated herself into their routine with such natural ease that it felt like she'd always been there, helping with homework, listening to bedtime stories, contributing to Lily's increasingly complex theories about everything from why grass was green to whether clouds had feelings. But now this. A message that sounded final, formal, like the kind of conversation that began with, "This has been wonderful, but..." and ended with polite explanations about why it couldn't continue. "Daddy, you look sad again," Lily observed from her spot on the couch where she was working on yet another drawing for Sophia's collection. "Are you thinking too hard? Maybe a little, sweetheart? Is it about Sophia? Because she's coming to read stories with me tomorrow, so you don't have to worry about that." The casual confidence in Lily's voice made Ethan's chest tighten. His daughter had accepted Sophia into their world so completely that she couldn't imagine any other reality. How could he explain that sometimes people left even when you loved them, even when they seemed to love you back? Mrs. Patterson agreed to watch Lily again, though not without her usual commentary about responsible parenting and the dangers of getting too attached to people who might not stick around. Her warnings echoed his own fears as he drove through the familiar Seattle streets toward what felt like an execution. The coffee shop looked different at night, smaller somehow, more intimate with most of the tables empty, and the evening crowd thinned to a few regulars nursing laptops in solitude. Sophia sat at their usual table by the window, but something was wrong. Her posture was too straight, her hands clasped too tightly around her coffee cup, her expression carefully neutral in a way that suggested she was holding back emotions too powerful to reveal. "Thank you for coming," she said as he settled across from her. "Of course, though I have to admit your message had me worried. I need to tell you something and I'm not sure how you're going to react." She took a breath that seemed to require tremendous effort. "I haven't been completely honest with you about who I am." The words hit him like ice water. Here it was, the revelation he'd been unconsciously waiting for since the night they met. She was married. She was moving away. She was someone completely different from the woman he'd fallen in love with. His mind raced through possibilities, each one worse than the last. "Okay." He managed his voice steadier than he felt. "My consulting business. It's not exactly small. Collins Strategic Solutions has offices in 12 cities and over 200 employees. I'm not just successful, Ethan. I'm wealthy. Very wealthy." The confession hung between them like something fragile and dangerous. Ethan stared at her, processing information that rearranged everything he thought he knew about their relationship. "How wealthy?" "Wealthy enough that money will never be a concern for me. Wealthy enough that I could buy the building your apartment is in without thinking about it. Wealthy enough that the dinner at Rosario's cost me less than you probably spend on gas in a month." The numbers swirled in his head, creating a chasm between them that seemed to grow wider with each word. He'd known she was successful, had sensed that she lived comfortably, but this was something entirely different. This was a different universe of existence, one where problems like his simply didn't exist. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I've spent my entire adult life having people change when they find out about my money. They either want something from me, or they decide they're not good enough for me, or they start treating me like I'm made of glass instead of flesh and blood." Her voice carried the weight of experience of disappointments that had taught her to guard this information carefully. "With you, I gotta just be Sophia. Not the CEO, not the success story, not the woman who could solve all your problems with a checkbook. Just me. And now I'm terrified that you're going to decide I've been dishonest, or that we're too different, or that my money makes this relationship impossible." Ethan sat in silence, watching her face in the amber light of the coffee shop. She looked vulnerable, in a way he'd never seen before, as if this confession had stripped away layers of protection she'd spent years constructing. The successful businesswoman was gone, replaced by someone who was simply afraid of losing something precious. "Is that what you want?" he asked finally. "To solve my problems with money?" "God, no. Ethan, your problems aren't problems to be solved. They're circumstances that have shaped you into the man you are, and I love who you are. Your struggles have made you strong and compassionate and real in ways that most people never achieve. But surely you can see how this changes things." "How?" The question was gentle but insistent, and Ethan found himself struggling to articulate fears that felt both overwhelming and somehow ridiculous when spoken aloud. "Because now I know that when I couldn't afford dessert at Rosario's, You were probably thinking about how pathetic it was to watch a grown man count change for coffee. Because every time I've worried about bills or groceries or whether I could afford to take Lily somewhere special, you've been sitting on enough money to make all of that disappear. Is that really what you think of me? Her voice was quiet hurt in a way that made him immediately regret his words. But the fears were real, rooted in years of feeling inadequate, of measuring his worth by his bank account and finding himself consistently lacking. I don't know what to think. This changes everything. Does it? Does it change the way I feel about Lily? Does it change the conversations we've had or the time we've spent together? Does it change the fact that you're the most genuine, caring man I've ever met? It changes the fact that you could have anyone. Anyone, Sophia. Why would you choose this? He gestured to himself, to the coffee shop, to the modest life he represented. Why would you choose struggle when you could have ease? Because I don't want ease. I want authenticity. I want someone who loves me for who I am, not what I can provide. I want someone whose daughter draws pictures of our family and talks about me like I'm already part of your world. The mention of Lily's drawings hit him like a physical blow. Those innocent crayon masterpieces that depicted their small family expanded to include Sophia. They represented his daughter's dreams, her vision of how their world could be. Was he really going to let his own insecurities destroy that? I need some air, he said, standing abruptly. Outside, the Seattle evening was cool and clear, with the kind of crisp air that usually helped him think. But tonight his thoughts were a jumbled mess of inadequacy and hope, fear, and possibility. Behind him through the coffee shop window he could see Sophia still sitting at their table, her shoulders curved in defeat. What was he doing? This woman had just told him she was wealthy beyond his imagination, and instead of being grateful or excited or any of the emotions a reasonable person might feel, he was running away. Because that's what he did when things got complicated. He ran, he hid, he protected himself and Lily from the inevitable disappointment that came with hoping for too much. But this time running meant leaving behind the best thing that had ever happened to them. His phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. Lily called me tonight. She's worried you're sad and won't tell her why. Whatever's going on, don't let your pride ruin something good. His 4-year-old daughter had called her aunt because she was worried about him. The thought was both heartbreaking and illuminating. Lily, who had accepted Sophia so completely, who drew pictures of their expanded family, who talked about museum adventures and scientific discoveries with the joy of someone whose world had suddenly gotten bigger and brighter. What message was he sending her about love, about trust, about the courage required to accept good things when they appeared? When he walked back into the coffee shop, Sophia looked up with eyes that were red-rimmed but hopeful. She'd been crying. He realized sitting alone at their table while he worked through his fears on the sidewalk. "I'm sorry," he said, settling back into his chair. "I'm an idiot. You're scared. There's a difference. I've spent so long thinking I wasn't enough that I forgot to consider whether you might actually want exactly what I have to offer. What do you have to offer, Ethan?" The question was asked gently with genuine curiosity rather than challenge. And suddenly, he found himself thinking not about his limitations but about his strengths. "I have love that doesn't come with conditions. I have a daughter who thinks you hung the moon. I have Sunday morning pancakes and bedtime stories and the kind of loyalty that doesn't waver when things get difficult. That sounds pretty valuable to me. But I also have student loans and a truck that needs work and an apartment where you can hear the neighbors through the walls. I have a job that leaves me exhausted and hands that are always slightly dirty and worries about money that will probably never completely go away. And I have money that can't buy the things that matter most. I have a big house that feels empty most of the time and business success that doesn't keep me warm at night. I have everything society says should make me happy, and I was lonely until I met you." She reached across the table and took his hands in hers, tracing the calluses with gentle fingers. "These hands work hard to take care of the people you love. This life you've built is real and meaningful and beautiful. Your money situation doesn't make you less worthy of love, Ethan. It makes you human. What if I can't get past the difference? What if I always feel like I'm not bringing enough to this relationship? Then we'll work on it together. Because that's what people do when they love each other. They face the hard stuff and figure it out as they go. Love. She'd said the word so simply, so naturally, as if it had always been part of their conversation. And maybe it had been woven through every shared meal and museum visit and quiet moment when words weren't necessary. "I love you too," he said, and the words felt like coming home. "Even though I'm rich, even though you're rich, though I reserve the right to be occasionally intimidated by it. And I reserve the right to occasionally pay for dinner without you having a crisis about it." They talked until the coffee shop began closing around them, working through the practical implications of their revelation, with the careful attention of people who understood that love required more than just emotion. It required planning, compromise, and the willingness to build something together that honored both of their experiences. When Ethan finally returned home, he found Lily asleep on the couch with Mrs. Patterson a new drawing clutched in her small fist. This one showed 4 figures instead of 3, herself, Ethan, Sophia, and what appeared to be a small animal. "She insisted on waiting up," Mrs. Patterson explained as he gently transferred Lily to her own bed. "Kept saying she had something important to show you." In the morning, Lily presented her latest masterpiece with the pride of an artist unveiling a commission. "It's our family with a puppy," she announced. "Sophia said she always wanted a dog, so I drew us one. His name is Pancake, because that's what we like to eat together. It's beautiful, sweetheart. Did you know Sophia has something she wants to tell us? Something good. Something very good. I knew it. I told you she looked at us like we were the best thing that happened to her. People don't look at you like that and then leave." That afternoon, when Sophia arrived for their Saturday museum visit, she came bearing gifts. Not expensive toys or elaborate gestures, but a small potted plant for Lily to tend, and a book of Seattle hiking trails for Ethan. "I thought we might explore some new places together," she said. "If you're interested in expanding our weekend adventures." "Can Pancake come hiking with us?" Lily asked, showing Sophia her latest drawing. "Who's Pancake?" "Our family dog. I haven't met him yet, but I drew him so we'd recognize him when he shows up." Sophia caught Ethan's eye over Lily's head, her expression full of wonder and delight at his daughter's complete confidence in their expanding world. "Well, we'll definitely keep an eye out for him." 6 months later, Ethan found himself standing in the backyard of Sophia's house. Their house now, though the adjustment was still surreal, watching Lily teach a golden retriever puppy named Pancake how to fetch sticks that were entirely too big for his small mouth. The house was everything their apartment hadn't been. Spacious, comfortable, surrounded by the kind of neighborhood where children played safely in tree-lined streets and parents gathered for block parties and impromptu barbecues. But more than the physical space, it was the sense of belonging that made it home. Sophia had insisted they move in, not because his apartment wasn't good enough, but because she wanted them to build something together from the beginning. She'd respected his need to contribute, finding ways for him to invest in their shared life that honored both his pride and their partnership. "Daddy, look how smart Pancake is," Lily called from across the yard where the puppy was indeed retrieving sticks, though with more enthusiasm than technique. "Very smart," Ethan agreed, settling onto the porch steps beside Sophia with 2 cups of coffee and the Sunday morning newspaper they now shared. "Any regrets?" She asked a question she still posed occasionally, as if she couldn't quite believe he'd chosen this life. Chosen her. Chosen the expansion of their small world into something bigger and more complex, but infinitely richer. "Only one," he said, and her face showed a flicker of concern before he continued. "I regret that it took me so long to realize that love doesn't have to be earned. Sometimes it's just freely given, and the only requirement is being brave enough to accept it." "That's very wise. I learned it from a 4-year-old who draws pictures of families and believes in happy endings." Lily ran toward them across the yard, Pancake tumbling after her with the boundless energy of youth, her face bright with the kind of joy that made everything else fade into background noise. "Sophia, can we make pancakes now? Pancake is hungry and I'm hungry and Daddy's always hungry." "I think that can be arranged, but first I have something for both of you." She disappeared into the house and returned with a small wrapped package that she handed to Lily with ceremonial seriousness. "What is it? Open it and see." Inside was a small wooden picture frame. and inside the frame was Lily's very first drawing. The simple crayon masterpiece of two stick figures, holding hands under a bright yellow sun that she'd created that night at Mickey's Diner so many months ago. "I saved it," Sophia said softly, "because it was the first time someone drew me into their family, and I wanted to remember exactly how that felt." Lily studied the drawing with the serious attention she brought to all important matters, then looked up at Sophia with eyes full of ancient wisdom contained in a very small package. "You were always part of our family," she said matter-of-factly. "We just had to wait for you to find us." And standing there in their backyard, surrounded by the evidence of a life built on love and courage and the willingness to believe in happy endings, Ethan understood that his daughter had been right all along. Some people really did look at you like you were the best thing that had happened to them. Some stories really did have fairy tale endings. And sometimes if you were very lucky and very brave, you got to live inside one of them. "Come on," Sophia said, standing and taking both their hands. "Let's go make some pancakes. I think we have a lot to celebrate." As they walked toward the house together, a man who'd learned to accept love, a woman who'd found her family, a little girl who'd always known how stories like this were supposed to end, and a golden retriever named Pancake who was just happy to be included. The Seattle morning sun broke through the clouds with the kind of light that made everything look possible. And in that moment, everything was.